let's go to the book, The World Turned Upside Down, Finding the Gospel in Stranger Things. And the first question is, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I have to confess it wasn't my idea. It was the publisher's idea. My bread and butter academically is supernatural stuff with unseen realm and supernatural and whatnot. But they knew that. They knew I loved the show. They knew I'd sort of been active in an apologetics way, the fringe community for over 20 years. And so they came to me with this idea, and I thought, it's really a good idea. I just knew sort of intuitively that I would be able to map the salvation history, the story of what God wanted, what God was up to, what the Bible really was about in terms of the way it presents truth as story. And again, I had my head in the show. So they asked at the right time. And it's really a good marriage. I also have to give kudos to my daughter. I mean, she's the one that got me into this show. My kids knew I was an X-Files fan, in the mid to late 90s. And so they came to me one day and said, "Hey, Dad, you should watch this show." It was about 3 episodes into the first season. So I sat down and watched an episode. I was hooked. I was hooked from the very first episode. And the more you think about what you're watching and how they follow all the major archetypes that the biblical story produces and tracks on. So this was actually easy to write. It was very easy. What I did was I had just self-published a little book called What Does God Want? I self-published it because I wanted to control the content for my nonprofit. We do translations of my content, the stuff that I have rights to. And in the first third of that book, which is for new believers and seekers, I tell the salvation history as story, 6, 7 pages, whatever it is, 10 pages. And I thought, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this story and I'm going to map the plot elements over to Stranger Things. Wow. And it was easy. Good storytelling will map to good storytelling. And the gospel, really the whole story of what God wants is a story well told. So it was easy to write this. The first several chapters of the book really start where the gospel story starts. Again, think about the gospel, since that's the familiar item here. Why do we need salvation? We're lost and we cannot save ourselves. I don't know how many of your audience have seen the show. I'm going to try not to do spoiler stuff here, but the show starts off with, a group of 4 kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they have to go home because it's getting dark out. And one of them gets abducted on the way home. And you, the viewer, know that there's something otherworldly, supernatural about what happens to Will. And the other characters in the show gradually come to this realization, and they're introduced to and confronted with another reality, an alternate reality, other dimension, that sort of thing. That's the way the show casts it. And the place is called the Upside Down, but it's also called the Vale of Shadows. It's the place of death and corruption. It's inescapable. Will cannot save himself. He knows he's going to die. And you, the viewer, knows he's going to die because he grows weaker and weaker. He's trying to avoid a creature that inhabits the Upside Down who's desperately trying to kill him and feast on him, devour him. And so you just know that there's no way this kid, he doesn't have a prayer. He's lost. And so I used that in the first couple of chapters, as lost as Will Byers, this is what we are. We are estranged. We are separated from the one who loves us most. Will is separated from his family, his friends, the people who love him. And they have no idea what's happened to him. They're helpless. He's helpless. He's in the realm of death. He's going to die. The only possible way he could ever hope to be delivered from this is an external power, and specifically a power that operates on the supernatural level. And so these are really easy metaphors to map to the condition of all of us. We're lost. We're going to die. Our separation from the one who loves us, God, is going to be made permanent if we are not delivered by a supernatural means, and specifically of God's own design. And so my hope is for this book is that people who love the show, who don't have any time for church talk and theology talk, or who hate, the gospel, or at least they think they do, I'm hoping that they will be struck by how well and how carefully the show maps over to these Bible things. I think this would be a great discussion starter for millennials, for postmodern thinkers, because, again, it was easy to write because it's so transparently there. And I'm not talking about simple allegory here. Oh, this thing happens to a character. That happened to Jesus. That happened to Peter. I'm not doing that in this book. This is conceptual, theological, worldview stuff where you have the biblical worldview, what we as academics would call salvation history. Really, what does God want? What's this whole thing about? What's the Bible about? and how that maps over to the storytelling of Stranger Things. And it starts just where you need it to. Nobody in the show is as lost as Will Byers, but we all are as lost as Will Byers, and we need deliverance from another source.